First of all, I want to say how sorry I am that I can't be here, and I hope you understand why. You know, as it happens, I got this cancer diagnosis that sort of hit me like I don't know. It hit me pretty hard, and I've been trying to deal with it, and it's because there was a misdiagnosis calling a tumor a hemorrhoid. I've already had it for 3 years, and when I looked into it, probably 5 years. So I had to be treated immediately if I was going to be here next year. So it became a choice of, you know, taking the chance but not living, or having this 70 to 80% cure and looking after myself. So I'm sorry about that. And I'm trying to see snippets of you online when you play and the concerts and everything, follow you. So even though I'm not here, I want to say to you, I hope you will enjoy yourself and get all this wonderful juice and nourishment from all these teachers. I really enjoyed seeing Angela Cheng teach on these little snippets on video snippets that everybody was sending me. And if I had known, I haven't seen you teach since Chicago, which was maybe 150 years ago. But I will give you, I hope you can come back next year, I will give you a special Pressler Award because you have this glow that is just like Pressler. It just made my day. It just moved me so much. So beautiful. And I just thank you so much for that gift. You just gave me this essential gift. It's like an energy transfer. I just love seeing it. Not that I don't love Christopher. He knows that if I were a student again, I would study with Christopher. But I mean, they're just, you know, it's very touched. So anyway, that's what I want to say. I'm really with you in spirit. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, it's really painful for me not to be here because my whole life is about giving my energy to other people and making a better world and teaching. And what I want to say is that really the future of the world is in your hands, the future of piano, the future of music. And that's why I started this festival. I want to keep it going because it's so important that we nurture ourselves and also give to others. But unfortunately, this is a time where I can't be giving, and frankly, I'm not really focused on Beethoven or Chopin or anybody. I'm trying to actually look into myself and nurture myself, which actually I never do because I'm always giving, but I really have no choice, and hopefully, according to the doctor, I should be well and ready to go before Christmas. You know? Wow. I hope so. So, you know, they think, I mean, because I'm not having a reaction to chemo, that's a unusual thing, completely unusual. He said he's only seen 1 or 2 cases in his entire career. Mm-hmm. So if this continues, I'm going to be good to go. Okay. Staff and the great faculty. So, you know, anybody here is happy to help you. This year just can't be. So, and everybody's been so generous for giving a little bit more. So grateful. Usually I get the questions from buzzing around, but I haven't been able to get that buzz in the same way because, well, Facebook just doesn't have that buzz. But I'm going to start by having you guys talk about what occurred to me is this. You know, as long as you're here and you have performance opportunities for yourself and you have performance opportunities outside and you get to know these people so well and interact, it's not only important to think about how am I going to make my own identity, because in the end, what really is important is your own spirit. Now, is great a teacher, as Angela Cheng is, you don't want to sound like her when you sit down, you want to sound like you. So that's really the mix of different personalities should confuse you, but help you say, okay, what do I like with this? Where is my instinct going? And extending that line, there are little side steps. I want you, my wish is that when you get up to play and you announce what you're going to play and who you are, you do it with poise and dignity. And when you go out to perform, one of the subtitles here is, and I think I'll just make it, we might have to have rehearsals next year. You can talk about yourself, introduce the music. You don't have to say your bio, when you started on piano when you were 1, or you won 5 competitions. You could say, I'm playing this piece tonight because I really love it, and this is what I love about it. But I was thinking about this, and we haven't emphasized this. There isn't any teacher or any performer that can't walk on stage and talk. Now, I don't care what language you use, but here, even if it's broken English, that's acceptable. So it's more than just how well you play, and if you're shy about talking, or if you don't know what to say, you can rehearse that a little bit with yourself. Because to make a career, no matter what percentage is performing or teaching or music or whatever, you need more than the ability to play as wonderfully well as you play. You need to learn how to write programs, you need to learn how to write resumes, you need to... So I wonder if you guys would like to talk a little bit about the different, it's a combination of a lot of factors. Who would like to speak first?
Well, I'll say something about talking and playing, actually, which I do a lot of these days. I was telling somebody this morning that I talk during concerts, actually out of self-defense, I find. Because for me, talking about the piece and drawing the audience's attention to the music rather than putting it on me is a big thing. And I have found that in general, I like the way that I play best when I'm teaching. So if I'm talking, I am ending up teaching a little bit more than performing, if that makes sense. So it helps me a little bit that way. And I think that it's important, especially if you're playing a piece like I'll be playing tomorrow, Christ the Honor. I think that it is important to explain the piece as we go through, because it's a big chunk of music to sit through and to keep track of. However, it is difficult, I find, to talk and perform, because when you are talking, if you don't know what you want to say, it's a little bit difficult to organize your thoughts, and sometimes you go down the rabbit hole and then you don't really say what you wanted to say. And then when you're playing, you say, oh, I should have said this, or I should have said that. So it's difficult to change your brain from playing to talking, and actually, I find it difficult these days not to talk when I go out, because then I feel that I haven't made a connection with the audience, that I haven't done what I normally do. So, and what ends up happening, or what has ended up happening, is that you have to simply do it a lot to get used to it, to learn how to turn your mind off, if you can, and then turn it back on to speak. It's a different skill. So anyway, that's just a bit of my experience, but I think it's very important. And even these days, we were talking the other night that at Cleveland, the Cleveland competition, they want you to be able to present yourself and talk. And in the 3rd round, they will actually be judging you on your presentation orally, what you say about your piece as well. So it is becoming very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to keep classical music alive, we have to think in terms of engaging the audience. So I think being able to teach them, inform them, awaken their ears as to what to listen to. I mean, for people maybe that haven't heard the Kreisleriana, for instance, it just gives them a whole sense of a journey as to what they should be focusing on. It's much more rewarding if you have a clear understanding before you actually set out for it. But it's true, the Cleveland International Piano Competition, I think this was even part of the jury process in the initial stages was, what is that personality? How do they respond to audiences? And they want someone that will really go out and represent themselves and be very open and engaging, I think, and very eager to share their love for music with the community.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Rebecca was saying about, developing your resume and all of these other things that are kind of extra musical. Have any of you ever taken a business course? If not, think about it either online or once you finish your studies, undergraduate or graduate studies, whatever they are. If you're so inclined, do consider maybe getting an MBA. And the reason I bring this up is I think you have to think of your playing, your actual artistic work. That's your product, which of course at this time of your life, you're working on it very hard, and you should. One always works on the product, but then there's also in businesses research and development, new repertoire, new ideas. How are you going to further develop this product? And then going along in a business, you of course have to figure out how are you going to market the product? Because you have a wonderful factory, you have a great product, but how in the world is anybody going to know that they should come out and buy that product? So you have to give some thought to marketing. This is where the resume comment comes in, or writing a biography, or figuring out how to maneuver social media and other forms of advertising. So try to, get your mind into that space. I know it sounds somewhat commercial and crass, and artists often, rebel against this type of thinking, but very few that have been successful don't engage in it in some way or have somebody else engage in it for them. So it's just, do think about taking a business course down the road and seeing how you can apply that to your own life work.
Well, I was going to say, oh,
Good.
I'm done.
I'm sorry. I am very uncomfortable speaking in public. Maybe because English was not my first language. And the very first time I had to give a lecture recital, it was a complete disaster. Because I had to look at the audience and I could see I was losing them all. And right after that, I remember coming home, I told my husband, I am never doing this again. Never, never, never. However, I think you're absolutely right. Most of our audiences don't know what we're doing up there. And it's important to share. Maybe my mistake was planning too detailed every word I was about to say. But to just speak to the audience, just say what you're going to be playing, talk very briefly about why you love this piece. Yeah, that was you who said that at lunch. Just explain, why did you choose this piece? Even if your teacher said, you should do this piece, well, just say, my teacher told me I should do this piece. but say why you love it, show them where it is that is special to you, and hopefully they'll do that. And like Professor Harding said, it just takes practice. It takes practice to do it and be comfortable. If you ask me to give a lecture recital today, I will still say no. But if you want me to speak because you feel it's important to your audiences, I will do it. I will not, say, I'm sorry, I'm better than that. Music will speak for itself. It will. But I will do it. I will probably try to practice it a little bit at home before I come. And then just keep it simple. Well, in Opus 110, I think the most important movement is the last movement. Why? Why do I think that's most important?
Yeah.
And just, just kind of very, very briefly. And then,
We changed the format, I changed the format of the soiree on purpose to memoir soirees. And the reason I did that is because, of last year's crop, everybody was really interested in hearing why so-and-so had a personal attachment to this piece. It really came up with Ursula Oppens, who had so many pieces performed for her, and what happened when she received it and all of that. So it's like a unique process. But then I asked a few more people, students, and they said, well, we'd really like to know the story behind why Professor Lowenthal got involved with this piece, or what triggered that. And so, that happens to you too. You don't just play what your teacher told you. You're moved by Chopin Mazurka or something, And I mean, I went all the way from Los Angeles to Indiana to study with George Sherwood because of the opening run of the Polonaise for piano and cello. And I was just like, wow, I have to learn how to do that. So, I mean, people fly halfway around the world and they do things, but that's the kind of personal connection that I think everybody is looking for in the world. And so you can just get up and say, well, I'm so pleased to be here, and I'm so happy you came. And you don't have to go beyond that, but you know, I think it's so important that you share this sort of spark, this sort of a very personal and intimate feeling. And that will come through more in your playing. And once you start to talk or think along these lines, you'll have a lot more ideas even about how you're going to phrase. Mm-hmm. And it comes back and it nurtures yourself. But when you explain a piece, then you get another idea. And you see something, it can be theoretical, it can be emotional. So just the emotional coding that happens between the Beethoven style and yourself is terribly important. Mm-hmm. And that's really the secret for keeping interpretations alive. Mm-hmm. It's not just repetition, you know, eating a banana every day. That's not it. So it's just a kind of a different pathway that I think I'd like to encourage you, and we're sort of going to go more into that, I think, in the future of this festival, because that's the future. I mean, that's clear. So I don't know what, yes,
I just have one thing to add, because I used to be so addicted to 3x5 cards. And I think it's a great way to start. I always used to be worried that I would get up in front and that I would just freeze and forget what I was going to say. I think it's fine, they're just palm size, right? You write out in one sentence, it's a prompt, and then it reminds you. I think it's a great way to start.
Well, I use my iPhone.
Yeah. Even better. Yeah, but I think it gives you the security if you have, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 points and you go blank, it gets you started, it keeps you going. Yeah.
What questions do you guys have? Usually, that's the next part of this. What would you like to hear us talk about? Yes?
I asked this as a 19-something-year-old who plans on being a teacher, mainly, either of theory or piano.
Can I know your name, because I haven't been here except 1 minute?
Sorry, it's Harrison.
Oh, nice to meet you.
You too. How did you make the transition from student to teacher, and is it a linear process, or is it ever going?
I don't know who wants to answer that, but whoever answers it, I just want to tell you that very question came up last year, and it was asked to Professor Lowenthal, and he said, oh, that was simple. I hated my teacher, so I just changed my major, and then I didn't have to study with that teacher anymore. And then, so he was on his own, but that's not the answer you're looking for. Okay, who wants to talk about that first?
Alvin hasn't said it. Thank you.
I can tell you how I made the transition, because I really wanted to, well, I studied with Professor, I guess, I don't know if it was a year or semester, I have to look that up, but I loved studying with Professor. But my main teacher in Indiana was Cheng, who I just adored. And even after I left Indiana, I always wanted to come back and play for him. And I used to follow him around and show up at his master classes and play, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember going out to McMinnville, Oregon for one of his classes there, and I showed up. I think I played the Bach team at a French theater ever. And so that was fine. I finished and he said, I have something to say to you, Roberta. And I said, what is that? And he said, I'm not going to teach you anymore. You don't need a teacher. Stop with the lessons. You're on your own, period. So I did what he said, because I loved his, and you know, there comes a time where you have to make a transition, and you can't really do that. Like, you know, there's a double bond, the piece is over, and you go on. I mean, That really is what happens, so that's what happened to me.
Mm.
What happened to you, Kathryn?
I was gonna say,
Everyone has a story.
when I was 11, we had a neighbor approached me to see if I would teach her 7-year-old son. And I'm like, sure, I'll give it a try. They had these method books that you could just kind of follow. I loved it. And this little boy took it very seriously. And I think by the time I was, senior in high school, I think I had about 20 students. And I didn't have to ask my parents for spending money. I was always on my own. So I mean, it had its practical aspect too. But I think teaching has always been absolutely in tandem with the playing. And it just happened really out of that early kind of childhood experience.
Angela, what happened to you? How did you get
I didn't even know I was going to be a musician. So I'm a late bloomer, very, very late. Yeah, so I'm not your normal path. I think teaching started when Mr. Presser asked me to be his assistant that one year. When he was traveling a lot, he wanted me to see some of the undergraduate students. And I remember thinking, gosh, why do I do this to myself? When I had to explain what they had to do, how to practice, I should take my own advice. It's a very good idea. So having to articulate and say what you think the music is about, to share, to try to get the other person to understand, only made it clearer for myself. And it continues to do that. I continue to learn from my students in many, many ways by just trying to explain what I'm trying to say. And also sometimes when they come in and they're so amazing, I think, I'm stealing that. Definitely stealing that. Because, there's so many ways of looking at music. And I guess my one word of advice is know that you will never learn it all. You will always continue to learn and just be open to it. There's no one right answer. There are many. Yeah, there are many.
And one of the interesting things, like when you start to teach yourself, you can see that if you say something. Like I used to imagine being over there in the other piano, like there was another piano, and Presser would be sitting there, or Rubinstein, or Chow. So I would play something, and I said, well, what, I would like talk to this, image. What would you say to me, Mr. Presser? And he would come back with something, and then I would, in my imagination, try that out. But then when you start to have a student, or you start to teach yourself that way, you'll be surprised that when you talk to yourself how changing one element changes everything. And I mean, when I was in Indiana, I had a whole series of dreams about studying the list, and he would come to me every night and tell me blah, 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 blah. Of course, I would go into my piano lesson, because Chow was a list nut. And I would tell him what Liz said, and he said, really? This whole thing going on. But so you can use your imagination, and it's not like a step by step. It's not a recipe. Start teaching yourself as though you're another teacher. Experiment. You have a great time. Now we have Christopher. How did you transition?
I never wanted to be a teacher, actually, and I would say that when I was in my undergraduate. I was telling a student about that maybe this morning. When I was at Eastern for my undergrad, I said, I don't want to teach, I want to play. And by the time I was going to be a senior, I would have management and just be out playing, right? So then that didn't happen, and I went to Indiana and became an AI, an associate instructor there. And in my very first lesson, I started to cry because I realized this is what I was meant to do. For me, teaching was easier than breathing, in a sense. It just came out. And what I have found is that what Angela said, what everyone has been saying, is that we teach ourselves, we teach our students, and that really, in the end, we become our own best teacher. We are our own best student because we have the most control of ourselves and the most responsibility for ourselves. And we ought to be learning and teaching ourselves all the time and experimenting, as both Rebecca and Angela have said. So I think that is you said, Rebecca, that there is a kind of, we should kind of draw it out, as it were, and yet it is kind of drawn out as you become older, you go to a master's level, and you shouldn't be studying like you were when you were an undergrad. And when you're a doctoral student, it's almost like you don't need a teacher at all, almost, in a way. You should be making your own decisions and be responsible for both the successes and the problems that you have. So that's, we just kind of grow and mature in that process. And then, of course, comes a time when you get a job and nobody's teaching you, as it were. You have to do it yourself. So it happens naturally, as a way, or at least it did happen naturally for me.
Alvin?
I will just say, I'll start with what my older daughter said to me when I was teaching her piano. That was an experiment that was a failed experiment. She quit piano after that. But she looked at me after a very hard lesson. She looked at me and she said, "Daddy, I know why you wanted to be a teacher." And I said, "Why?" "You just like telling people what to do."
Right.
And I said, "Well, you know, that part of it is true. But there is something about it for me that it's, I've never looked at teaching as a job. It's never been a career path. It's just always been what I've wanted to do. And I look at the person in front of me as a kind of a partner. We're sharing in this experience. You have needs, I have some things that I can offer to you, and I'm willing to share it with you. And in the process, I think that it's just caring about the other person. I know that sounds sentimental, but I really care about my students. I want them to learn as much as they can. You know, sometimes they're difficult. Sometimes I can be difficult. But I think in the long run, it really is just wanting to share what I love about this music and making sure that they love it as much as I do. And that's my primary goal. So that's what I think about it.
Roberta?
Well, Harrison, I think your question is well answered, you know, with all of the stories and the anecdotes that you're hearing. And basically, don't worry too much about it, that you have to make the decision of when this demarcation is going to take place. Because as you can hear from the stories, life will teach you, the world will teach you, and the environment will encourage you when that time is right. And I do kind of agree with Christopher. It is, I believe, somewhat of a gradual process. And I think one of the first steps is, you know, listening to yourself play. How many of you make videos or recordings of your practice sessions or your rehearsals or your concert? Everybody has everybody? You have already started. You see, that is step one. You're taking your own, you know, input from something that you've recorded. So that's the beginning. And then as you have teaching opportunities, et cetera, as you begin to have performing opportunities, particularly where they pay you, then it's another level of professionalism. So it's a gradual thing, but the world will teach you when the time is right.
How many people, as long as you're here, do you play for one another, or when you want to know how you sound, you turn on your iPhone or whatever? How do you figure out how you sound? What do you do? How do you listen to yourself? Speak, somebody. Otherwise, we're just going to have to go around row by row.
I mean, sometimes I'll I'll just video like a short excerpt
Right.
of whatever I'm working on in that point in the practice session. Either to I'll normally just do it to send to my teacher just to either show him where I'm at or just to,
For yourself.
yeah. And
So do most of you do that? Is that how you find out where you are? Yes or no? Yes? Am I getting yes? Speak up. I mean, this is
I
not
see a lot
like
of
an
nods.
interrogation. So is that what you usually do? Record yourself a little bit? Everybody's shaking their head? So when we were growing up, there was no way to do that.
No.
So one of the interesting things is if I was really confused or, you know, how does this sound? I would have to go on whoever my friend there was practicing on the second floor. I was in 203. I would say, what, you know, how does this sound? Or what do you think of that? And then, of course, it's just another opinion. But I needed an outside source. So, you know, that's fine that you do that. I would really encourage you to do that. I think it's a higher level because you're getting more, you know, you're getting feedback about yourself and you're listening with your own ears. So that's a really good first step, and then you are teaching yourself already. Because you're gonna say, I mean, especially like if you record yourself and you listen back right away, you know, it might sound one way. If you listen 3 days later, you might say, oh my God, this is terrible. Or, wow, this isn't so bad. This is really great. So, you know, I think that you should use the modern technology. All of you. Another question. Don't be so shy.
I just have one thing to
Yeah.
add to that. You know, in my undergraduate, I developed a friendship with a girl that we almost, I would have to say, I feel like she has been one of my teachers, and we would geek out on Friday nights, we'd play for each other, and like you said, that was the access that we had to other, you know, other listening ears. But I would say her ideas and her opinions were just as important as what I was getting from my weekly teacher at the time. So I think, and you get to know each other, you get to know each other's, you know, needs, strengths and weaknesses. And I think so developing either a practice partner or performance partner or several partners, I think very, very valuable. And we're lifelong friends too. It really developed a very nice friendship.
It's a great way to try out a program. It's much better than playing for a dog. You know, because you have a living, breathing,
Yeah.
responding person.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have another question. Okay, I see a hand. Great.
So for all of you,
Can I know your name, please?
Oh, Adela.
Hi.
Hi. So for all of you as like already established professionals with lifelong careers, does burnout ever happen? And when it does, like how do you find the right balance between life, career, maybe family, and everything else?
Yes.
Find a good man. Or a good woman. I mean, find a good partner.
But here we have the Good Man Award coming. Great.
No, it's important. It's important because, you know, not only did we study with the same teachers, he knows how lucky I am if I get a concert, how important it is, and he's supportive. He's not like, well, if you play this concert, you're gonna have to give me the month of March because I've given you the month of February. No, that's not what it's about. It's all about support and helping each other. And so I had a built-in iPhone years before iPhone. I just played for him. Of course, we fight and argue constantly afterwards. What do you mean? I was doing that. Oh, no, you weren't. Oh, yes, I am. I meant to. But, you know, it's important. But I think you, again, just don't worry so much. Life will develop, as Professor Ross said. It will eventually find, and you'll learn to adjust. My husband has adjusted to me for many, many years. Yeah, when I first met him, my goal in life was to find a man and go back to Canada and work in Safeway because I like the outfits. And I like to punching those numbers.
This is true.
This is really true.
This is true.
Absolutely.
No,
She
it's true.
actually articulated that to me when we first met. That is what I want to do.
That's what I wanted to do. Then, you know, then 6 months later, I was studying with somebody that was so amazingly inspiring. I thought, oh, music
Maybe
is
I don't want
amazing.
to be Safeway.
I didn't want to be Safeway anymore, Safeway cashier. So, but you know, I've been very, very lucky. And I was only able to do all the things I've done because of the support of somebody who was willing to ride along with me. So, really, I meant it. Find a good partner. Or, if you don't want a partner, be strong.
I think it goes without saying that you have to have your own support system.
That's right, for
I mean,
sure.
you really, because not everybody is lucky to
I
meet
know.
like that, and some people don't find the right person
know.
or whatever. So, you know, and I think that you have to learn to adjust your own balance. Even as great a rapport as you have, I mean, I'm sure that nothing is perfectly balanced all the time because that just cannot be. So you have to be flexible and you have to be okay when you're not in balance and you know that the balance is going to change. So it is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for everybody. It's really a challenge to make sense of chaos.
And I think it is important to trust your own instincts. I mean, I think if you do feel on the verge of burnout, I think it's important to take that step back for that day or two or that week. And I think it's very minimal amount of time you find that you need to regenerate. But it's just kind of honoring it, listening to it, and just always being in conversation internally with yourself as to what
I think
those
it's
limits are.
important to say that nobody practices 365 days a year.
Right.
Period. I mean, it's just because there are times when you either can't practice, or you don't want to practice, or you don't feel well, or if there's something else that you have to do. I mean, I didn't plan on not playing now, but I'm not playing much, although I'm starting to because of my connection. But I mean, you get into situations where there's no choice, and you have to just go along with it. Any other comments on this subject? Oh, burnout. Next question. Yes. Who are you?
My name is Adrian.
Hi, Adrian. Oh, I know. I can recognize you from last year.
So I had a question. During my lesson with Professor Hardy, you mentioned like accents in Schumann, Timidos, or other things like that. I was wondering if you could recommend any sources or books that you think every pianist should read or learn about to learn things, such as that.
Wow, wow. So now I feel judged by my faculty. I don't have any recommendations about books that everyone should read. I can tell you some books which have been interesting to me about that subject, for instance. If you read the Sandra Rosenblum book, I don't even know the title, but I know that's her, the author's name. It's on interpreting the music of Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert. So it's a big, thick orange book, about performance practice. That can be very, very interesting. I'll tell you what was inspiring to me to read, before I got to my undergraduate even, was to read the books by Schoenberg, the New York Times critic, the great pianists, the great conductors, the great composers, the lives of the great composers. Those I think we should read anyway, so that we get an idea of our history, as it were. Because so many times, my students these days, many of my students, they don't know who the old pianists were. Or when we listen on YouTube, sometimes I get tired of dealing with them for the 6th week in a row on the same problem and the same Chopin ballade. So I say, okay, let's listen to some people. So we'll listen to some people, and we listen to who comes up first on YouTube, and then I might search for old recordings of Cortot or even older if I can find them. And then I say, who did you like best? And they say, oh, I like Chow. And I say, why? And then my students said, oh, because she sounds like me. That's not why we're listening here. I said, but many of my students just don't know the old pianists, as it were, and that's important. So I think it's good to get to know our history, as it were. I don't know if there are other books that...
We were talking last night, was it at dinner the night before, about the way literature courses are being taught now. And I think with access to technology, when we were going to school, there was a famous book, and maybe a lot of you have it, but the History of Western Music by Grout. And the benefit of that, of having an actual anthology, is that you understand the chronology of the way things happen. And then you can kind of put together, okay, that fell into that period stylistically, and were they transitional? And that helps you make a lot of decisions artistically about where those land. So there's talk, in certain universities, certain settings, that maybe they'll get rid of some of the required books. So then maybe you wouldn't have access or the need to have to learn the chronology. But I still think that's really important. So I think a basic book that could be very useful, wouldn't maybe talk about accents necessarily, but I think it's important to have a timeline of the history of, from the Gregorian chant to the music that was written last week, just to be able to understand how things have developed. I think it really can help you answer a lot of questions as you're learning, each composer's.
I thought of another one. It's called Men, Women, and Pianos.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know this one?
Yeah.
By, is it Arthur or Frank Lesser? I think it's Arthur.
Oh, I think it's
Arthur Lesser, L-O-E-S-S-E-R.
That's a great one.
And it's a kind of social history of the piano from way back you know, from the time of Penneys to whenever it was written, I think in the 60s. So that was a fun book to read. And I read that because my teacher, Alvin, says, you know, you should read this book. It was the funniest book I ever read. I actually laughed out loud reading it. And I think I found the place where she was laughing out loud because it's very funny, I have to say. So, and that's, for me, I like reading stories. I don't like reading growls, although I have read growl. But I like reading stories of the people. I mean, that's what's so good about the Schubert books, is that it's stories, and he has his opinion for sure. But it's fun to read, and I think that that's a nice benefit.
Nalita also made me buy that book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I read it too.
And for context, actually, Arthur Lesser was the head of the piano department for many years at the Cleveland Institute of Music. So that's for, yeah, and a Bach specialist, primarily. Yeah. And I haven't read it. I'm going to go buy it.
Another question. I'm sure you have a question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Shira. So I want to ask about a question is how to practice efficiently. Because my own experience, in my school, sometimes we only have 4 hours a day to practice because the practice room is limited. So how do we use this so limited time to practice more efficiently?
I think you can practice a lot without being at a piano. You know, you read these stories of Glenn Gould learning the next concerto on the train, you know, from the previous concert. And I think if you're organized enough about studying the score and then knowing that you have 4 hours the next day or whatever to access the instrument, it gives you a real sense of focus as to what it is you're going to try to accomplish, and maybe as specific as you can be in that. It gives you sort of a journal, and of course you wouldn't want to feel hemmed into that, but it does give one a little bit of a sense of a starting point. I remember someone saying too that as they're practicing, they try to force themselves, because you can really get stuck on a piece, right? Over and over, and 2 hours later you're working, you know, that out. But giving yourself a limited amount of time, say, okay, after an hour, no matter what, I'm going to close the book, and then take notes of where did I end up and what am I going to do tomorrow, and what will be my time limit then. I mean, I think when you're talking about time management and having efficient, I think the careful planning might be the.
Well, you know, when you get a job, if you have 4 hours a day to practice, that's going to be a lot. Or if you have a child, goodbye practice time for a while. So, you know, that 4 hours is a really good chunk of time. And, you know, Rubinstein never practiced more than 2.5. Or, I mean, you know, so I'm not saying, you know, part of it is organization. Part of it is just saying, okay, I'm going to practice just, well, I don't know what, F minor ballade today. Or, you know, your goals, you can't expect to get through a whole recital program unless you already know it and you're going to play it through and you're going to perform it. So you have to actually have a plan. And 4 hours is a really good chunk of time. You should be able to get a lot done. Most people don't concentrate well, you know, after 45 minutes or so, they need a break. So if you're sitting there for 4 hours without a break, you know, half of that time is probably down the drain anyway. So you really need, it sounds like you need a better planning, not more time.
You know, that when I was a student, an undergraduate student, I was very much an organized person in general. And so I would actually make out my daily schedule. I had one of those week at a glance. And so I would do, every day, I'd mark out all my classes. That was first. And the second I would do is map out sleeping time. Then the third thing was mapping out eating. I love to eat, so I'm not going to skip any meals. So and then I look at all the rest of the time. I would actually mark out the hours specifically that I was going to be able to practice. So some schools, you can't find a room when you want it, so you have to adjust. But basically, I would just go through and I'd map out, these are the hours I'm going to practice. Then I would go into each slot and decide what I was going to practice for that hour. And then you do that for the first day. The second day, we're talking about weeks, so I'm thinking, I have this lesson, how am I going to get there? I have to have other pieces that I'm going to get ready for 2 weeks from now, others that I'm going to play in a recital in a month, so how am I going to pace this all out? If I can see it on a piece of paper, I can make it happen. It's just a matter of realizing sometimes I think, wow, I have lots of time. Other times I'm thinking, I have not enough time, so what am I going to do? But I'll figure it out. As far as the attention span is concerned, there's this great study which shows that if you set aside a certain amount of time for any kind of single task, the brain sparks at the very beginning of that time period, and then at the very end, when it knows it's about to finish. In the middle, the attention span tends to just sag. So the idea is to bring the beginning and the end closer together. So that means shorter spans of time and then change tasks. Do that amount of practicing. You can still practice an hour, but maybe you're just doing 20 minutes on something, then go to something else for 20 minutes, then go to something else for 20 minutes, because the change of task is what sparks the brain to function more efficiently. So the longer span that you have between beginning and end, the more time your brain has time to just sag. So I'm all about changing tasks. You can sit at a piano for quite a bit of time if you want, and then change the task, or you just assign yourself about time, leave, do something else, and then come back so that your brain has time to recharge itself. So those are the things that I think of when I practice.
I have a couple suggestions for you. I have a question first though. Do you know any conductors?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to them or watch them, because conductors' rehearsal time is very short and very precious. And remember, you're a conductor, this is your orchestra. And so try to think the way they do. They'll have a 2-hour rehearsal or 3-hour rehearsals, but it's very short and they have got to get a full program together. And so they will write out, okay, 40 minutes on the Beethoven, 75 minutes on the Mahler, whatever. They will write out roughly what they want to rehearse. So you can kind of approach it that way. And then many of you are in music schools and you can't always get as much sign-out time as you want or get the rooms as you want. Remember, it's very useful to try to sing your music, literally sing it away from the piano. You're mostly probably playing, Western European common practice period music, right? It's all 4 voices, your soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Try to pick those up and try to literally sing those away from the keyboard. This opens your ear up in a wonderful way so that when you come back to the instrument, there's kind of an awakening that happens. So those are a couple things I can suggest.
And can conduct as well.
Oh, absolutely. Conducting
Piece
away.
as well.
Get your music stand, learn all the patterns, and sit there, conduct, and hear in your imagination that Beethoven's sonata is sounding like a Beethoven symphony. Okay, oh, this would be oboe, this would be that. It helps. It also helps a great deal with basic rhythm. I've had so many students, I'll say, okay, now let's try to conduct it. And it's kind of a disaster, imagine, because they can't, but it really helps them kind of solidify what is the rhythmic structure of a given piece.
And if I may just add very quickly, I would start backwards, knowing you have a recital on, let's say, April 1st. Okay, what has to happen? By what time? What date? Surely memorize at least a month before. Out of that program, which is the hardest, go backwards. Plan it out in that organization that all my colleagues have talked about. But be kind of smart about it. You know what that date is. We have to play it. You have to plan trying things out. Yeah, tryouts. When this has to be learned, plan it out backwards. Knowing where that goal is, and then plan it out. And then I'm not as organized as my husband, but every morning when I'm showering, washing my hair, I'm going through, okay, I have 45 minutes here, 20 minutes there. What can I get done? And then you do it, Because sometimes it's nice, I'm always saying, oh, I have a plan A. Oh, I'm now on plan F. Because we didn't make it. So be flexible, but know that you have to have certain things done by a certain date. Yeah? And then if you're ahead of schedule, bravo. Take a day off. Go outside, take a walk. Yeah? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what I would do. I find that I sleep better knowing that I can get there, hopefully.
One thing too that I just want to, I think there was a quote, and maybe Alvin can help me, that Nalita True apparently said once, is that your practice sessions should be the exploration of all of the ideas that you thought of between your practice sessions, so that we're not going into I assume that what's meant by that is we're not going into our practice sessions trying, like a to-do list and trying to get everything done, but that they're enjoyable, provocative, that you're trying to explore all the ideas that you thought about on your walk between, or during your shower, or while you're eating your dinner, out about like these moments of inspiration, and then finally when you do get to the piano, then it's this creative process, that we can't ever lose sight of the creative element of it.
So if you are creative and you do some of these things, and when you do go to the piano, time expands. It sounds a little bit that if you feel like, oh, wait for us. So you're not enough in that experimental and just basic organizational world, because an hour is a long time. I mean, it can feel really short or really long. As Fernando Leras we used to have these lengthy conversations about time and space. And one of his big things is that what's going wrong with education now is there's not enough space in the time. And I couldn't agree more, because space is really shrunk. And so, you have to expand because time in music, there's space and time, equal amount. So you need to feel more space, and then you'll have more time. That's what I say. We have one more question. Who has a final? Yes.
Hi, my name is Sam. I was wondering, I feel like one of the most important things when you're performing a piece is to make your performance stand out. Like, you don't want to just play the same way everyone else has heard it. You want it to be authentic to yourself, but then there's also like the danger of taking too many liberties to the point where you're not really being true to what's on the score, or not doing what the composer told you. Like, Glenn Gould is often criticized for doing stuff totally differently. So I guess my question is, how do you determine how much liberty you can take with a certain piece?
Well, Rubenstein said, I think he wrote this, he said it to me personally, and I think Rammstein, it's famous. He said, when you play and you want to have a career, you only need 51% of the population to like you. So I think that it's hard to imagine that you would be too far out, anybody here would be too far out, and that you wouldn't get some kind of a pushback like, I don't understand that, or you might not even understand your own performance if you listen to it. So I don't think that's a big danger, and I'm for letting people, including myself, experiment and express themselves, because it's always easier to trim a plant than it is to make it grow from seed. So if you're having big worries about is this too far out, be too far out. That might just be something that is a good wave for you to ride. I mean, I was a teacher of Chris Poseidon, who's now a very, very famous forte pianist in his career, mostly in Europe. And I remember when he played Mozart for one of his recitals or whatever, and I remember Tom Schumacher standing up and saying, how can you allow him to play Mozart like that? And I said, why not? I mean, it was really in a very, strict forte piano style. It was just too much for him. And it was out there a little bit, but he was only 17 years old, my God, So if you would if you look Chris Poseidon up now and listen to any of his forte piano recordings, which are many on YouTube things, an explanation about why it's important to know forte piano, blah, 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 I think you would find it really interesting. So, you don't find your path by trying to fit in. I don't know your playing, but I would say it's great that you're a little out there. Bravo, stay out there for a while. You don't want to be like everybody else.
No.
Any more comments?
Well, I might say, and just recently as I was adjudicating both competitions live, but also kind of pre-screening for initial rounds of live competitions, I kept asking myself, there were just so many wonderful pianists. We're playing all the right notes, all the right dynamics, but there were only a handful that really spoke to me. I was trying to ask myself, so what is it that sets them apart? And I think a lot of it, the music has to be its own language. It can't just be that you're recreating something kind of as a copy of something, but I think it has to speak through you, maybe with your own subtext, like through your own journey. How can you relate to this in your personal experience? How can this move through you in an authentic way, which will then communicate authentically? But that's something that I grappled with this spring as I was listening to a variety of competitions. And I think, honestly, the ones that spoke are the ones that are awarded to, the ones that really did communicate in a personal level, because that's ultimately what reaches the audience, is when you walk away feeling that you were changed because this person took you to a different place. That it wasn't predictable what was going to happen, but you were waiting to see what they were going to say next. So that's in the power of the performer, that magical power really that we have.
You know, I heard Glenn Gould play many times because he used to come annually to LA, and he knew my teacher, Audie Tucker, very well, and actually I met him, and he used to sit on the floor and practice. I mean, he was a strange man, no question about it. But one of the things that was so incredible, like it was like hearing Horwitz or Rubinstein. Glenn Gould had this. He went on a trip when he performed, and that meant that when he was flag practicing or whatever, so I would encourage you to go on your trips. I love to practice because it's a trip. I mean, some people say it's an escape. I don't know. It's sort of like if a spaceship came to my window and said, "Hey, do you want to go to space?" I'd say, "Sure." I hop right in. But it's an adventure, So that's a road. That's a road you have to construct so that when you sit down at the piano, you can still be critical of yourself, and you can still figure out why you missed this particular arpeggio every single time and fix it. But you still need to be open to an inner journey. And that's the whole thing that keeps your love of music and yourself connected. So it's great that you are having trips, more trips and stuff.
Yeah, and if I may, it doesn't have to be your own. Wow, if you can produce a recording, here you get performance of Rubinstein. I mean, not that I'm encouraging you to copy thing from thing, because it won't be authentic as.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because I owned the piano for about 10 years that Rachmaninoff recorded on. I just happened to find this collapsed D. It was a C and A, and it was a long, complicated story. But I bought it for $2,000. Had it rebuilt, and I had it rebuilt according to the way it was when Rachmaninoff recorded on it, as an experiment. It's not a great performing piano, and by now, this was a 1917 D, but. So there were these recordings because they say which piano. So I would listen to him play, and then I would go to my piano, and I would say, his name was Rocky, and I would say, "Can you do that? How can you make that sound?" It was just, I played tons of Rachmaninoff. It was just such a learning experience. But of course, I'm not Rachmaninoff. I mean, you know that going into it, but it was still such a wonderful learning to try to reproduce the way Cortot plays anything or something that you like. You learn a tremendous amount. You learn how to go on these trips, and you learn a lot about technique and sound and the whole thing.
And we can have the best plan in the world. This is what I think the piece should go like this. But it's a live performance. It's creative. It's a conversation. So maybe you ask the question slightly too loud. What are you going to do? My answer has to be like this. No, you respond and you react and you create. So if one performance to the next is not the same, great.
That's right.
Yeah. So sometimes these trips you may step in a pothole. That's also okay. That's right? So just try it. But when you start hearing the same things over and over again, like people you don't even know say, "Oh, you just play too soft." Another person says, "You play too soft." Another person says it. When it gets to about 15 people, maybe you should think about it. So that's what I do.
Okay, so we're done here for today. So I just want to tell you all that my plan, if it goes well, is I plan to be here next time for the next I think the next Q&A, Tomasz Unger, who is a person that I went to Bloomington with, I haven't seen him for 50 years or more. I guess it's 60 years or, well, whatever. I mean, he may remember, but I haven't seen him since we were at the last Shabbat party together. So I want to do his, it's kind of a reflections thing, and I think he and I have a lot to reflect about. A life in music. So my intent is to be here, and as I said, please enjoy it, and my regrets that I can't be here more, and thank you all for coming. I really loved, I mean, you were invited to come because I loved your playing, and I look forward to hearing you through video for this year. I'm going to actually try to come to the 2 showcase concerts if I'm well enough. Thank you guys. Okay.